It's just over a month until Halloween, and for those that like a good ghost read, then a new book has just come out that does include creepy stories and more. Joining me in the studio to tell us more about Gothic literature is author Emma Morrissey. Welcome, Emma. Thank you very much for coming in. So just tell us, first of all, what inspired you to write this book of short stories kind of about on the Gothic themes, is it?
Yeah. Well, several things I think always inspire me to write. Obviously, I'm quite into the culture itself, but various different things from some of my favourite authors, Edgar Allan Poe and Bram Stoker. And I think there's also always a great interest in this type of genre, because fantasy and horror is something that always comes into popular culture from current things like Game of Thrones, and there's still a huge fan base for the likes of Harry Potter. So I get my inspirations from all sorts of different places.
And can you just tell us about some of the stories? What are the themes or the ideas or little summaries of some of the stories that you've got in there?
Yeah, I've tried to be as diverse as possible, so there's something for everyone. There's from romance and action, and there's also some themes from medieval times and our own Victorian era as well. And I suppose some examples of some of the stories would be, there's some stories of stone gargoyles that come to life. There are ice sculptures which grant wishes. There are medieval relics which have great power. And I've had a lot of great feedback from people that aren't necessarily into Gothic culture at all, but I think they've been able to find some sort of magic and mystery in it, which I think is sort of brought its appeal to many different people.
And you said there that it's kind of for everyone, but is it, are they scary? Is it for children, or is it more for kind of grown-ups, or who's meant to be reading this?
I'd say probably teenage upwards. I think it's not particularly scary or gruesome or anything like that, but it's definitely got a lot of magic and mystery to it.
Where do you get the ideas for these kind of crazy, outlandish, magical things?
It might sound slightly cheesy to say that I get it from my imagination, but I really do, to be fair. Yeah, I get all sorts of different ideas from various places that just come to me, and I have to write them down. And they became a series of short stories, and not only have I written them, but I've illustrated the book as well all the way through.
And lots of kind of Gothic or fantasy are written as short stories, but why did you choose to write yours as short stories? Because lots of people do like kind of a good novel as well to get into.
Absolutely. Well, I suppose in a way this book could be a sequel to my first book of this genre called Gothic Poetry, and that was very well received, and I think from the feedback I got from that, a lot of people, they love poetry, but I think there was a real need for something a little bit more, something a little bit longer. So I thought what I would do is all the ideas I get, just turn them into a real story that people can really start to relate to and get involved in the characters and the ideas behind it.
Is it easier writing kind of prose as opposed to poetry? Because I can only think of poetry being incredibly difficult.
I think both of them were very enjoyable for me to write, of course, because it's something that I have a great passion for. But stories, yes, it was a joy to write each story. And poetry, I suppose you take a slightly different approach to it, because, of course, mostly they're not as long as stories. But yes, I think short stories, there's a certain amount of magic just in that, I think, because a short story can be a short story, but if someone really gets involved in it, they keep hold of those characters.
And what next? You've done poetry, you've done short stories. Is it next Gothic plays, or tell me?
I think as this one is being well received already, I'd say there is probably definitely an interest for a third, perhaps. There's obviously a huge following for Gothic culture and fantasy. And
why do you think that is? Why are people so intrigued by
I think it's a form of escapism for people. I think it's something that you can get lost in. You can get lost in a good sort of fantasy, whether it be a story or a film. I think that's probably what it is to people. It allows them 5 minutes to get away from their busy lives just so they can give themselves to something completely different.
And there's nothing particular about Gothic, because I mean, people could say that about cartoons, couldn't they? That
Absolutely.
It's so unreal. Is there something specific about this kind of mysterious Gothic vibe?
I think the one thing with Gothic culture in particular, if you go back far enough, from fashion in the Victorian era, from corsets, it was a very feminine view for the first time. And I think also there's that sort of mystical romance to it. I think a lot of Gothic romance, again, if you look at Dracula, for example, there's a lot of romance in there. There's a lot of dark romance, and I think that's something that's current in all the horror movies that are made today.
Okay. Emma, thank you very much for coming in and telling us all about it. Wish you the best of luck with that and all further future Gothic enterprises that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you.